right, folks, we're live.
Hello. Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
But we're having an impromptu roundtable tonight. We were going to do something else, and just that didn't happen, so we had enough people to do this, so this is what we're going to do. Frecky usually hosts, but she is currently in the middle of some business, so I'll be taking the MC role for tonight. What we're going to be talking about tonight is first time playing a tabletop RPG and first time actually running a game as a DM. So before we jump into the subjects, though, let's start with introducing everybody that's going to be here tonight. Starting with Four-Toed Sloth.
What's up, everybody? I'm Four-Toed Sloth. I'm a professional DM on Roll20. I do pay-to-play games, run homebrew modules, and as well as certified modules and D&D 5e adventures. Been at this for a few years now, and really love it. Really ready to get out there and tell you guys about my first time.
I guess I'm next. I am a very tired Basch today. You might have seen some of my characters, also known as Basch, or I can't think of many of my other characters that you would have seen on stream.
Edel.
Yeah, people. I've been playing tabletop for a few years now, but I still consider myself very new. I guess you're next, Ray.
I'm Frey. Emily, as most people know me, Arlana, Arvex, Tum Tums, Olabella. I've been playing D&D a few years now, but I've been playing role-playing games a few years before that, mostly because Cute started helping me learn how to play. I actually started with Exalted rather than D&D. And I've never actually DM'd a D&D game before, but I have DM'd my own game, and I have another game coming up I'm going to DM, but we'll talk about that when we get to that part.
And again, I'm Miro. I've been doing this off and on DMing since 2003 in different type of systems. And I'm thinking back, since we mentioned being a player, I'm going to have to take a minute to remember exactly when was the first game I played. So I will go last on this question, but we'll start with Four-Toed Sloth. Tell us about the first time you ever played a tabletop.
Well, I mean, does Monopoly count? Because if so, then I started very early. They wanted to instill capitalism in me at a very young age.
Let's go more RPG tabletop.
But RPG tabletops, I actually got into that a little later in life. I was about 26, 27. And it was actually a group of people from work that we were all working in this kitchen together. And, we just never had time to go out, or all the bars were closed after we got done working. So there was nothing to do. So we just all gathered up at my house, and everyone brought a sixer, and we sat around and we made characters, and we played it in a little pirate campaign, and it was fun. It was like random roll for all your character, for your race, your stats, your class. No one knew what was going on. We had one guy who'd been DMing since 2nd edition, and he kind of like brought us all into it and fostered us up. And most of the people played for 2 or 3 games and then they dipped off, but I got a taste for it and I fell in love. And I have been hardcore into D&D ever since.
follow up to that for you. What'd you play? What was your first class and character?
Absolutely random rolled. It was a water genasi, warlock.
Nice.
And so we took my patron as we used the Unearthed Arcana patron for Lurker in the Deep because he thought, oh, it's cool, water genasi that like sugar daddy is the Kraken. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm down for that. Like my magical sugar daddy is the Kraken.
Yeah, you cut your teeth on Warlock.
I did. Cut my teeth on Warlock.
I'm curious if you remember how, like, did you add any flair to your magic to kind of make the spells more Kraken relatable?
I was at
roll?
the time I was so new to it. I was just like obsessed with the rules. I have this fixating personality that whenever I get into something, I need to know everything about it. So I was hitting up every forum, every fucking free resource site that I could grab my hands on. I was absorbing all the information about D&D that I could because like I had found this new thing that I love to do and I just wanted to do it all the time and I wanted to think about it all the time. And but it never dawned on me that everything in D&D can be reskinned. I actually didn't think about that until later on. But the Unearthed Arcana actually had a lot of flavor in to help me out with it. Like the summoning of a spectral tentacle and some of your weapon attacks and stuff doing a little bit of cold damage or a little bit of lightning damage here. Giving you the ability to talk to fish. I felt like Aquaman, dude, and not like the old Super Friends that came on Boomerang Aquaman who sucked.
Justice League.
I'm talking about like the gritty Aquaman from the Justice League that had the hook for a hand and come out and was like, I'll mess you up. I felt it, dude. It was great. I enjoyed it.
Adding a little flavor like that's always fun, and one reason I love the Warlock class. But I'll be honest, when I looked at 5e eventually, I was like, man, Warlock. How long has it been since I played D&D? Because this was the name of a bad guy the last time I checked. But that was a couple years ago. So I guess, Basch, same question. First time you played.
Well, since we're sticking to tabletop RPG type stuff, the first time I technically played a tabletop game is back in the 90s, and we were playing this little game called Dragon Strike. It's kind of like a board game with D&D type elements. So you had like you chose from like a set of a handful of characters, and you'd go through a castle and kill the baddies, save the princess kind of deal. All the pieces ended up getting used for other things, though, as you can imagine. But I think my first this is one of those not newfangled, but one of those fandangle tabletop games would be when I was still in the Navy, deployed. You get very bored, and somebody pulls out a book of Pathfinder and is like, "Hey, let's do something fun besides sitting here." So we played a campaign of Pathfinder, which was kind of difficult to actually play since half the people in it were working nights, the other half working days. And it had quite an interesting mix of people as well. Like a couple of nerds, and then a couple of like super jocks played football during high school. And of course, the jock type people were the ones that got really into their characters too, which I still think is really funny.
See,
and so my since Toad brought up his first character, I think I'll bring up mine. He was a half-elf druid. I had no idea what I was doing, and most of the time my answer revolved around, I'm going to smack it.
Cast Shillelagh, hit the thing.
I don't even know what spells I had. As it was explained to me, the classes, just a quick rundown since I was kind of the last one invited. DM basically said I could make trees get up and move and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great.
They failed to tell you what level you had to be for that, though, didn't they?
I didn't care. The campaign didn't go very long. It kind of fell apart when work picked up and everybody gets busy, and it's already difficult to set schedules nowadays. It's like that, but far worse with more work, where you're actually debating on whether you want to eat or get sleep for the day.
Fun. Same question, Frey.
I'm trying to remember. We played like 3.5 game in college. Like, I don't know if we made it past 1 or 2 sessions. I know I played a ranger. And I only remember because my favorite enemy at the time was sparkly vampires, because at the time I was really hating Twilight. I think we might have played that for, I don't know, because the game that I remember starting on the most is not D&D, but Exalted, which we first played when our friend Noah DM'd for us a little bit, and then that we only played a few sessions of that, and then he would start DMing a game for me and 2 of our friends at the time, and sometimes Topher would jump in, and you use so many D10s in that game, so many D10s. And we started out at pretty high level, and the higher you get and the more powerful you get, the more D10s you have to roll. And what was Axum's dice pool at one point on that one attack you did?
56.
56 D10s that he had to roll, because he had like 6 arms in this form and he could hit with all of them, and he had like sharp claws and poison or something. It was like, Jesus friggin' Christ. So, but it was such a fun game. And to this day, my character that I made, she was a lunar whose animal form was a red panda named Tsukiko. And to this day, she's still one of my favorite characters I've ever created. Partly because she was pretty good at combat, but she was amazing at social combat. Like, I could literally make someone forget what their name was when I got high enough level. It was just really fun. And we played a little bit of Pathfinder. I don't remember a whole lot of that. I think Chris DM'd that, but I don't remember. But I'm trying to remember the first like legit D&D game that we played, other than that 3.5 that I don't remember if we ever played much of. What do you remember? What was our first actual D&D game together?
I think it might have actually been a D20 modern steampunk game. Was the first major one
We
we
had
did.
that. I mean, that wasn't really. I guess that was technically same rules as D&D. It was our steampunk game that we played for a while. But I'm trying to think, because I remember switching from Exalted over to D&D and roll in, D20 modern. I was like, but I have all these D10s and I like all my dice. And then we started rolling like, 1 dice for each roll. Like, oh, this is way easier. I don't have to count so much. But I've tried to play something new every time we played a game. Like, I very rarely repeat. The only thing I really have repeated is Ranger. I tend to make Rangers if I have to make something quickly. But it's just always been fun. And I remember it wasn't until I moved down here in college that I really started playing. I knew when we used to go to the game shop with some of my friends at home, like in high school and early college before I moved, there were D&D groups there, but they were mostly the, stereotype of a D&D group. They were almost all guys older than me, had probably been playing since second edition, and you could tell that they weren't, even if I asked if I could play, they weren't gonna make it easy for me to try and jump in, which it was their campaign, whatever. But I never got a chance to play, and when we went and visited my parents back around Thanksgiving, I met with a friend that I've known since high school, Matt, and I said, "How did we not play D&D in high school? How did we not do this? We were gigantic fucking nerds. How did we never play D&D? How did we never start a group?" He goes, "Well, I played some D&D. Yeah, well, you never asked me to play." It's like, I didn't know. I didn't know either. That's why you should have asked me. But I'm
I
pretty
can
sure
answer that one. I can answer that one for myself. Hormones is why I did not play D&D in high school.
I would have played D&D in high school if I'd known anyone who was into it enough to show me how. Like, none of my friends really played. Not only we, ragged on or anything. We did other things. So I wish I'd started playing D sooner, but I will say this: even though we only played like one game with the 3.5, I love 5e. As someone who's really number stupid, 5e is streamlined and so much easier for me.
Yeah, I find that 5e is a lot easier to get into for most newcomers, whereas the more what do you want to call them? Old school prefer the crunchiness of previous versions.
And there's nothing wrong with the previous versions, although I'm sure people would argue there's plenty wrong with 4th edition. But
Well, I'll put it this way: fans will always find ways to make what they enjoy better.
oh yeah,
That's the big thing I've heard with 4th edition is either you love it or you don't.
Well, I once in a blue moon I tried 4th, and I see a lot. Well, not a lot, but a good chunk of 4th made it into 5th. It's like they took good ideas from 3.5, and 4th, and made 5th edition. I think was their goal. Although I imagine a lot of people have said that too.
I think it's
but yeah, that was how I started out. Exalted, moving into other things, and then D&D.
Ease of use is a good thing, but I believe the thing that's really made D&D's resurgence is the fact that they made the base game freely accessible to people.
that is a huge part.
Because you got to think about when Fortnite actually hit the height of its popularity, everyone was like, "Oh, why is Fortnite? Everything's Fortnite." But Fortnite was base game was free, and
Yeah.
no, like that was the thing that made it so successful. The base game was free. If you wanted add-ons, extra skins, things like that, then you could get into the pay-to-play game. But if you just wanted to get on and play Fortnite and PlayerUnknown Battleground, this was not a game that you had to go into Walmart or hop on Amazon and pay $50 for and upload to your console. Like, you could pull and download a free app on your tablet and run that game. It opened the market up for gaming to people who had not previously had access to this thing. That there was a price barrier in front of the players, and now it just flooded. And it's the same thing that's happened to D&D. I see it every day on Roll20. Is there are so many players looking for games that there's not enough DMs to keep up with them.
Now, I'll look it up for just a moment. You mentioned that the game was, or the base game, I guess the player handbook was freely accessible. I actually
No,
didn't.
the base rules. The
Oh,
players.
just the.
No, the base rules for D&D is free. You can hop on and download D&D Beyond right now, and you have base rules of how to play D&D there at your fingertips. Actions, reactions, basic classes, all your subclasses, all of your different flavors and spell. They even have free spells on there too. You can get on there and make a character. Whenever I first started off, I had 0 books, 0 anything. I used D&D Beyond to make my very first character, and I played for like 3 months with that character with spending $0.
And I feel like it's a lot easier, even if it's stuff you have to pay for. It's easier to find than it used to be. I used to come across D&D stuff in, a bookstore, Walden Books. I almost said that, just dated my friggin' self. But I, I mean, it was there, but it was never front and center. It was always, shoved in the back, past the manga and the comic books. Now it's you go into Walmart and you can get a starter kit for D&D. It's crazy.
But the popularity there came from them making the base rules freely accessible to the public. That would have never happened. Even with the being mainstream, even with the success of Critical Role, even with all of these things, there would have been a price barrier. Because if you're looking to play a game for the first time and you walk up, D&D, you need, for the first time to play, before 5th edition, someone needed the Dungeon Master's Guide. Someone needed that. Or because it had basic monsters, basic encounters, basic rules, and everything. Someone needed to have the player's handbook. There's 2 books there. Whatever the price was back in yesteryears, I don't know. I didn't start in on until 5th edition.
I remember them being expensive when I would see them.
But it was more than I would never pay $40 to try a game out that I might not like. I just wouldn't. Personally, I come from a poor rural background. Can't you hear it in my accent? I can't afford that. So, if I'm not sure I'm going to like it, I can't drop that. That's been one of the things that turned me off to it for years. I think Warhammer is fascinating at a distance, but until that has some changes in its makeup, I won't be touching that because I don't make that kind of money.
Warhammer models are ridiculous.
Yeah, I just, I believe that them making things free is made for a lot of new players and new people coming into the craft. And the more people you have into the craft, the more people you have contributing to the craft. And it makes it better for everyone.
I've definitely seen that. Like going back to, I guess, bring us back a little bit to the main subject. Like I remember the very first game I played was in 1996, which means I played 2nd edition. At first, I kept swearing it was 3rd edition or 3.5, but when I gone back and remembered what Noah's old Dungeon Master's book looked like, I'm like, oh, that's the 2nd edition reprint book. So, and I remember going to Books A Million or going to Borders or to Walden and seeing like, this is a $35, $40 book back in like 1996, 1997. And, that was pricey. And I remember the very first game I played a half-elf monk named Ryu with blue hair because you got to have the blue hair.
90s.
Yeah, 90s, Dragon Ball Z, anime kid. I played Ryu 3 times, not in the same continuity. It's just I didn't feel like making a new character sheet. And problem with a lot of those early games is like Noah, being a brand new DM at that time, would kill us all or kill off most of the party because, I mean, we were all being jackasses to begin with, and he'd get frustrated, and then all of a sudden you got a young blue dragon that shows up, and I accidentally kill it by breaking a church and crushing its skull with the bell, but also killing the rest of the party that was underneath the dragon trying to stab it. But yeah, back in the day, like, it was
Oddly specific.
I mean,
I
are you
put
really you're playing? You're not trying to kill your party.
what'd you say?
Are you ever truly playing if you don't inadvertently kill your party too?
It depends on what the storyline, I would argue, but big thing with it is like back in the day, the very first time I tried to play, there was a comic shop here named Clint's, and I loved Clint's. It was a little hole in the wall. Clint ran the shop. It was comics. It was Warhammer minis when everything was made out of pewter, and like you had to like solder shit together. Magic the Gathering, and then just comic books dating all the way back to the mid '60s. And oddly enough, this is the first time I remember smelling pot, and then learning years later that that was pot, because Clint was just an old hippie. But they had a
Mind
well-established.
your business.
Oh no, always did. When Clint passed away, a lot of people went out to his little secret hidey hole and enjoyed themselves one last time for him. But like there was an established group there, and I'm talking these were like back when it was Fighting Man, Magic User, you know, when it was just the modified rules for the tabletop game Chainmail, like that level of old school D&D gamers, and they weren't going to let a kid in, but I would watch them occasionally, and it was cool. And then when Noah ran a game, it was awesome, and I loved playing it, and that there was a cooperative storytelling element there. And one of the things I think that's really helped 5th edition is it kind of makes that easier for the players because they're not doing all the math, all the crunchy stuff. And I miss, okay, I'll say this, I miss the crunchy stuff until I have to go back and do the crunchy stuff, like playing Pathfinder 3.5 and being a fighter with like 80 different feats that allow you to do ridiculous stuff like knock arrows out of the air. You know, some days I miss that, and then I realize very quickly, no, I don't, because you don't need to have 5 hours of combat in a 6-hour session that you might play on a Saturday. It taught me math, but I really like with 5e, and one of the things I think that's made it more accessible is, okay, we did this, it's a much easier rule set to remember, it's much more accessible. Now it allows me to actually focus more on what is my character doing and what is my character's motivation. Because back in the day, it's I'm going to go in a dungeon, make some gold, and get some levels. Now it's like, why am I doing this? And I know a little bit of that might also be who was your DM at the time in that situation. Like that, I won't lie, that's one thing I don't really miss about the older school style is like back in the day when you used to only get XP by clearing the dungeon itself. And it could be fun, but I really like the roleplay element that has become much more focused on in the games today.
It is a revival of the American imagination.
That's one way to put it.
Well, not just the American, but the imagination of our youth. Do you guys remember? You're all grew up in the 90s, 80s, something like that, right?
Yeah.
We're all
Born late
roughly
80s.
we're all roughly same age. So you guys all remember finding the stick. Like you know the stick that was either your gun or your holy sword or the horse that you charged into battle with. You remember the stick.
I often had the stick that was the Green Ranger's thing that made his Dragon Zord come out.
Exactly, the little flute dagger that made no sense that he could blow on without lip holes in.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. I even know the tune.
absolutely. So, but we remember the stick. Kids, I'm not to sound like an old man. Kids today don't have the stick anymore. Like, and I feel like D&D coming out here is getting really popular with a lot more young people, and it's giving them more of an open imagination, because instead of it's a video game, and nothing against video games, I love video games, I play them all the time, but not a video game where it's go fetch quest point A, point B, do this. You can jump, you can roll, you can slide, and you can strike, and that's what you do. These are different button combos to how you can do that. But like, you can be really good and do all of that inside of that world, but there are strict like things you can and can't do. Like, remember Red Dead, you couldn't step in water for some reason. I mean, I know why, design and stuff, but like, I feel like D&D's giving them back their stick.
I like that.
See,
That is a very interesting way to put it.
it's a good way to put it. It's also, man, this is, I think I've griped about this on a different one of these that we've done, is it's why I love in a module when, like, say you get something like Dragon Heist or Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and all of a sudden there's this room we've written nothing for. Come up with something. I'm like, that's a huge gift to you. And especially as if there's someone that's a starting DM, this is where you can really start to stretch it, and you could have the stick gun or the stick sword. You know, you have that chance to stretch your imagination. My only problem that I ever run into is people, why would they leave this blank? That's lazy writing. I'm like, dude, no, this is a gift as a DM. The second that they give you the right, you know, if you feel like you have to follow the module to the letter, this is then them giving you the right at that point to just do whatever the hell you want with this room. I mean, the big thing to me is a module is a hint, a tip, a nod for what you should be doing, and then just have fun with it. Like, instead of having a tiefling nailed to the wall in this room that if you put the heart in, it'll talk to you, all of a sudden there's a mechanical wizard challenge you to a drinking contest. I mean, switch stuff up, do stuff that's fun, have fun with it, do something weird. I think I've said that one on the podcast before, is if you're given the opportunity in a D&D game, do something weird, especially if you're the DM.
Walter the Were-Rat has a bazaar set up in this corner of the sewer. Would you like to buy some magic item?
You actually bring up a really good point, and since we have a professional DM here, I would like to hear your opinion on this. So a lot of people who DM usually run into that issue where the module doesn't clearly state something, and they kind of don't know what to do. Do you think that's just from like inexperience, or they're not kind of going, oh, this is on me to come up with something?
All right, so if you're running modules, I can only give one rule above all else. Read the thing first. Read it. It's going to suck. It's going to be confusing. You're going to have to read certain things, like sections, multiple times, because it cites all these places. It tells you to look here, look there. You're going to be going from page 6, page 60, back to page 35 to get through the first paragraph of page 8, you know, and it can get confusing, but make yourself some cliff notes. Try to organize it to where your references are easy, color-coded or whatever. If you're running from a paperback book, if you're doing it on something like Roll20, they're in little handout slots that you can reorganize how you need them. But lots of times whenever you run into things like that, I like to personally just give the party a little room and see what they do, because the party can do a lot of the work for you. The DM doesn't have to do everything by themselves. If you leave 4 knuckleheads alone for 5 seconds, they will get into trouble all on their own.
An example is your dwarven cleric and the other dwarven death cleric finding out there's such a thing as beer nuggets at the bazaar and then spending a lot of gold and starting a fight to get more of them.
But read the module first, guys, please. Read it. You will thank yourself if you pick up a module and go into just play it. Oh God, I actually had a friend of mine do this with Descent into Avernus. There is a shield, the shield of the Hidden Lord, and inside of it is a horrible pit fiend who just wants to call out to you and try and corrupt your mind and get you to release him from this shield, which can give you some powers if you attune to it. It's supposed, but he jumped the gun because he saw this shield. He's like, "Oh, it's hanging on the wall here." Derailed like 2 chapters of the module for yourself because he didn't read ahead and know that we weren't supposed to get the shield that early. So read ahead, because otherwise you might accidentally give your party a level 6 plus or 7 magical item when they're level 3s and 4s, and that can really screw up every encounter that you guys come into, and it can really overpower one character, which you have to compensate for, and then you have other characters in the party start to die, or you have the little group greed of all the characters inside. Like, he got a magic item. Where's my magic item? Read the module.
I actually picked up a conversion, 5e conversion for a Castle Amber. And page 1, it says, if you plan to run this campaign or module, read it in its entirety.
They all say that. Oh, every one of them I've seen said read it in the entirety. Curse of Strahd has everything that happens in it is based off of these tarot cards, or Taroka is what they're called in the game, but Taroka cards, and based off the reading where they find items and where they find certain people and who will help them fight the Devil Strahd and stuff. It's almost completely random. The whole thing is, excuse the dog in the background,
Having fun.
And even with all of that randomness, if you are not aware of plot hooks and about where this thing should happen or how this NPC should act, you can end up hamstringing your own campaign, and you can end up ruining the experience for yourself and the players. Or the players may never know that you made the mistake, but if you, as like a newer DM running a module, if you do this to yourself, it will ruin it for you. It could, I'm not gonna say it will, it could ruin it for yourself because it incurs more work on your part, makes things more difficult to balance encounters, and whenever the game stops being fun for the DM, it stops being fun for everyone. No one likes a cranky DM.
Very similar with the phrase, if mama's not happy, nobody happy.
Well, I mean, as a DM, you control everything in the world, everything they experience, everything they see. And if you lose heart, if your heart's not in it, and you start lazily explaining things, and like the players get confused because you have to remember that they only know and they can only see and they can only touch and experience the things that you allow them to touch, see, smell, hear, all of that. It's in your hands as the DM. The only thing they can choose is how they react to the things that you give them. And if your heart's not in it, then it can ruin it for them. And as a DM, you take on a certain amount of a responsibility to ensure that the people playing with you have fun. But you need to have fun yourself.
To be fair, that's an easy one to forget sometimes. I won't lie, there's been campaigns before that you could definitely tell, like I believe it's especially with the Dresden one I run for Emily and her friends. You can tell when I'm not feeling it that night. but I still pushed on because I said I would run the game. But that's definitely a point that especially new DMs need to remember is make sure you're having fun too, or else no one else is.
Absolutely.
Kind of segueing that into our second question, first time DMing. I'll start with this one because Emily already kind of mentioned it. Our buddy Noah ran games for us for the longest time until his first child was born, and then the amount of games kind of dropped off. We played every so often, and then we really wanted to still keep playing the Exalted campaign we were playing, so I bought the Solar book and then bought the Lunar book. And if you want a game that is book heavy and gets expensive, it is Exalted because each Exalted has its own rule set. And so I started running it as a side campaign, made my character into an NPC, and that game ran off and on for close to 5 years, I think. And it was fun. I learned a lot. One of the big things I learned is don't get 100% married to your storyline. Make sure that
Your characters are godlike.
you have a concept and run with it. But my mistake in that first campaign that I had to fix was I got married to the idea I had, and I tried to railroad it a little bit, and I learned from that experience and then just said, all right, I'm opening this up more, and just, if you decide to burn the mother down, let's run with it. And since then, that's been one of the lessons I learned as a DM is you got to have most of the time, you got to have a very loose hand with a lot of this so that your players really feel like what they do has an impact, what they do matters. And once I let go of that after a couple sessions, the game just became more fun for everybody. Even though combat in Exalted takes like 3 damn hours for a 3-second round. But it just kind of evolved from that point. So let's bounce to Four-Toed Sloth.
Oh man, mine. I wasn't. I would like to say that I never fell into the trap of being too married to the idea of what you wanted to go on. I tried to be open and free form, but the trap that I set off on myself was that I I put things dependent on the characters to progress the story. Like everything rested on them rolling good and getting a treasure chest open to find the note inside. And whenever they failed and just effed off and left it alone, was like, screw this chest, we can't get into it, and walked off. I didn't know. I was confused because I had said everything on that one linchpin there. And it staggered me bad. And I ran into that problem a lot of times where I would hinge everything on them noticing one thing, and you'd put everything on that one thing, and then they would just completely ignore it and go off, and everything go off the rails, and I'd have to completely come out with something ad-libbed and random on the fly. I just quit doing all that extra prep. I just watched where my characters went and then what they were doing, and I just kind of like shepherded them along the way instead of trying to get them to follow breadcrumbs. I just followed them. But
That's
my
I was gonna say that's a big thing with DMing is to make sure. The way I usually put it is have good bones and then let the players fill in everything else.
absolutely, but I was putting nervous systems down, man, and that was my trap was over preparing and and I'm super detail oriented, and I let that be my destruction many times DMing. My first game was a Shanghai game. Everyone had been kidnapped from random ports and woke up on an ore gang, and they had to escape from this ore gang on a pirate ship. And most everything depended on one of them being able to pick the lot. Well, we had 2 rogues in the party because everyone was going to be playing in a little pirate game. You know, my first game was a pirate game. I loved it. I wanted to try and kind of relive that with my first game that I DM'd. And those rogues could not pass a DC 13 lock check to save their lives. For nothing. I eventually had to, like, they broke their tools with natural ones. Everything went wrong for them. I eventually just had to ad lib to where one of the guard was drunk and passed out over the top of one of them, allowing them to get the keys, because even their sleight of hands couldn't steal the key from him. It was bad. My first DMing session was absolutely terrible. No, we played one session of it, that one mission, and then we never met back up again. I waited for probably 3 or 4 months after that before I DM'd another one. I was heartbroken. It's kind of like the first time you go for an open mic night, tell a joke, and nobody laughed.
It's harsh. Have you thought about trying to run it again with the knowledge you have now?
Oh, absolutely. And I've run different versions of it. Not that exact thing, but
Did go back and run it. Oh, in a way.
Yeah. I've since modified my behavior for DMing. So it's a nice plot hook that I now have revised and sitting in my notebook waiting to one day see the light of day. I'm saving it for maybe a setup for Ghosts of Saltmarsh or something.
Ghost of Saltmarsh is fun. I haven't run anything yet, but just reading through I loves it.
That's an old module, isn't it? Or is it one of the 5e ones?
Ghost of Saltmarsh is the 5e one, but most of the modules within it are reprints,
Like
and it's reprints of some old British modules, like that I listened to a podcast where they talked about the planning stages for it, and it's like when they were reading through it, they had to remind one of their freelancers that honor and color are spelled differently in England.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of them were written by the short-lived TSR British office.
What about you, Bash? What was your first experience like?
So, I got to tell a story real fast to get to my first experience.
Because like reading a recipe online.
Yeah, sorry,
as
long as the story doesn't start, well, I was a young man and it was the summer of...
My grandmother used to tell me.
Well, it was me and Stephanie out in the movie theater. No. So, let's see. It several years ago, I think. More recently, I had kind of gotten into D&D, and I quotations properly, and I say D&D. It's Pathfinder at the time, since that's what I had on hand was a Pathfinder book, and so I got like a handful of friends together. None of us. I was the only one who had any experience, and my experience was limited. Like, even to this day, I have yet to finish any campaign that I'm in. But to be fair, most campaigns take a long time. And so a friend of mine was just like, "Hey, I'm a story writer, so I'll DM." And we're like, "Okay, I'll help everybody kind of get their characters together since I vaguely know what I'm doing." And I didn't know at the time, but he had been reading Game of Thrones, like the book series, and he was trying to like do something more comparable to that. Um, but inexperience as a DM kind of ruined everything when the characters just said, you know what, the hell with this, we're gonna go do this thing. Or there's supposed to be like huge tension between these two countries, and one of the characters who's supposed to be a noble, know all this, just says, you know what, I'm going to the other side of the bridge and I'm going to ask the guards for a croissant. And so after a little while of things just kind of not really going, I offered to DM. And I read up time I had been playing a lot of JRPGs. So I guess some of you who have had brand new GMs who are somewhat new to the game probably already know what happened. So I write up this whole campaign, and yes, I know like the whole players will never do what you want them to do, so you don't put in like super amounts of detail, just enough to get by. And so I had all that. I like had a basic storyline in my head with like certain things that I did want to happen. And but what ended up happening was they got through like the first section. It was great fun. They were stuck in like a destroyed city, and they had to figure out what had happened to the city. And then just they had to escort an NPC back to their home. Um, but I didn't make the travel fun, which was the primary problem. Even when I addressed it, I felt like the campaign would have been too far gone. The amount of retooling I'd need to do to still keep the storyline that I had functional would just be far too much. Luckily, that's when COVID hit and everything kind of shut down. So I had the group wasn't meeting, so I had a couple of weeks to kind of sit and think through the campaign and all the feedback I had gotten, and I ended up just canceling it. But overall, I'd say with the story, I tried for far too much. Instead of keeping things more localized, I tried for this big grand adventure where you have the JRPG syndrome, where you have just this group of upstarts who eventually end up taking on the gods. But I'm currently DMing a second campaign right now, and it is much more successful. I've learned a lot of lessons, and even as I'm doing this campaign, I'm still learning and adjusting on the fly. I kind of have a better idea of what works, what doesn't work. There's some kind of slow points and a lot of high points, but I seem to have found a nice balance. I also tend to borrow ideas from other games that I'm playing in.
As a teacher, there is nothing wrong with borrowing.
Like I'll be frank, I loved the idea of that bile troll that you had in one of your campaigns that nearly wiped the group, and I was thinking to myself, I wanted to do a special Christmas session for them, so I used that bile troll, and I created an NPC, Noble Nick.
It's awful.
And so what I had was the bile troll had an amulet, and the troll used the amulet to steal Noble Nick's happiness. So the players had to search the town for that. And then he told them that the troll had come in and stolen his jolliness, and so they had to hunt down the troll next, which put up quite the fight.
Oh, those trolls about took us out.
Well, I also wanted an excuse to give them some interesting magical items.
Nice.
I find I like the idea of non-combat magic items. Like, oh, here's a ring that'll just swap places with an ally because reasons. Or another technically magical item is that they recently got was a coin, but on the coin that they didn't notice was a amethyst dragon, and that coin is the Amethyst Dragon's Hoard. It's a singular gold coin. And it's a tiny little dragon right now. But it could become a problem later. Or it might not.
Maybe.
Man, talking about non-combat magic items to hop off topic, I have seen more done with an immovable rod than the greatest of swords or bows.
I really do love when someone takes a minor
I
item.
don't think you're pushing your button here.
I'm pushing it, but something's not. Am I coming through now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was pushing the button, but my computer is being dumb. I love when someone takes an object that like everybody overlooks and then does something ridiculous with it. Like I absolutely love. And same thing goes for like cantrips. I love when someone does something goofy with a cantrip. Like easiest one, prestidigitation or thaumaturgy. Using that to do something that's like, oh, it's not just damage. You're like, I'm going to trick them. Like, I'm completely cool with that. Or I'm going to use subtle magic and make it look like he soiled himself in the middle of his conversation. Like, I like that. I like the irreverent use. Huh?
I said, oh, Arcabanks.
I love the irreverent use
clear
of
it.
something.
You need to clear a tavern quick. Druidcraft makes it smell like a skunk just sprayed in there. Nobody will stay in that tavern.
I've done that before.
You want to creep out a bunch of street punks? Make all the shutters on every window come open with thaumaturgy.
I use Druidcraft to make a city guard more likely to help us because he had a cold, and I used it to create some flowers that he can make into tea to make him feel better.
It's the reason I like
Immovable rod.
Like one of the things I love, like in our Tuesday night game that both Frey and Basch are in, like until they got into the Wizard's Tower in Luskin, the magic items I was giving out are not actually that great. Like, oh, you got a ring that allows you to cast cantrip, or you got this one little monocle that basically allows you to cast Identify 3 times a day. You get some.
That identification monocle has been fantastic.
Oh, it has been, and I mostly gave that to you because nobody had Identify, and y'all were like, this might be magic. I'm like, mm-hmm. Or it's a glowy rock. It could just be a glowy rock.
What happens when we hit something with a glowy rock?
Throw some dirt on it. If it sticks, it's not magical. There's another pro tip for you guys.
That is true. But, like, his Bosch's character, Croesus, has a tusk that is a magic item that just gave him. It basically is pointing towards a phylactery, and it gave him proficiency in survival as long as he keeps it on his person.
Oh, that's what I thought it was. I was convinced it was either pointing directly at the Lich or his phylactery.
We mentioned that in the game that it was pointing at the phylactery. That's why I didn't consider it a spoiler.
No, we mentioned that we had to find the phylactery, so you just gave us some meta there, honey.
Yeah, you did just meta that.
I did just meta that. I'm sorry. I thought it was clarified by the Lich that you talked to.
So you guys don't use that then.
No, I mean, it's going to come up anyway, but...
My character was already convinced it had to do something with the Lich. Because, so he's been testing it off and on, and it's been pointing in one direction, but now that the Lich has appeared and is on the move, that direction it's pointing to has moved. So that tells me it's either A, the Lich, or something related to the Lich, which might be the phylactery. Of course, he's not had a chance to speak that yet, as he's currently standing on a wall with a few quote-unquote allies.
Not the plan! We're supposed to be back at the docks, but you had to go out and be like, I'm gonna save everybody!
I passed the message off to our moon cleric, who was supposed to relay. He's like, oh, by the way, we should go to the wall and defend.
That did not make it through in time.
No.
Yeah, there was To give Four-Toed Sloth an idea, the city of Luskin is about to get swarmed by an undead scourge that has a skeletal dragon in its ranks, and the party got divided, and one player is on the wall of the city watching this horde make its way towards the city, and this dragon have lightning illuminate its form, while the rest of the party's back at the docks like, yeah, we're getting ready to go, right?
Cool. On that note, in the spirit of all the listeners, I don't know how many we have. For first-time players, pro tips here: when you walk into a new room, always look up, and do not split the party.
Never split the party.
Never split the party. I don't care if you're level 20.
Try not
Don't
to.
split the party.
Be
Don't.
fair. If somebody had recanted my message, like, oh, by the way, Croesus says this, the party wouldn't be split.
And nobody did that.
Rule number 3: never count on the other jackasses you're playing with.
That's a valid point too.
It's all right. It's just it's an already dead dragon. Bahamut will deal with it.
I love watching the moral dilemma come up for a lot of people out there playing paladins or clerics that just are on the smashy side. That whenever a party member goes down, I love watching that whole moral dilemma of I can hit the bad guy or I can heal my friend.
Oh, that happens to me as our sorcerer all the friggin' time.
Happens to my father-in-law all the time.
Well, Frey had to save your father-in-law in one of our previous games.
Oh yeah, that's right. She does do that.
Yep, I did. But getting back to the DMing part of our conversation, like I said before, I've never actually DM'd a D&D game. I'm extremely intimidated to do so. What I have DM'd is a game I made, and it was 2-3 years ago. It was for Hewitt's birthday, and originally I was going to do a little one-shot, a D&D one-shot, but I was realizing the ideas I had were this isn't really working with the D&D stuff. I could make it work, but I'm also not really quite doing what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, we've been playing Crash Pandas and a lot of Grant Howitt games lately, so I was like, I'll create something like that. So what I ended up making was Critter Showdown, which is a D6 based short game. It's a lot like a lot of other Grant Howitt games. You roll to get your characters. You can be you could be a buffalo or a horse or a pig or it was 6 different animals, 6 different positions in the town. Like you could be the sheriff, you could be a showgirl, you could be a bartender. And you rolled for weapons, and you were set in this Wild West town with all these anthropomorphic creatures, and you had to save your town from a gang who was coming the next day. So the first half of the game was you set traps, board up houses, hide weapons, get people out of town or get them to be safe. The second part is the gang shows up and you have to use what you did in the first half to help you beat them. And I worked on it for about a month before Hewitt's birthday. He didn't know what I was doing. He knew I was making a game, and that's it. He didn't know what the hell I was doing. So the day of, I sent everybody else it earlier, but the day of, I sent him the documents of what we were going to do. And we live streamed it, and that was the first time I ever DM'd anything, and I've DM'd it twice. The first time, and the next year I did it for his birthday too. And next month, and I'm going to be doing a Glitter Hearts game, which I've posted about on the Discord. And I already know, I already am doing the Hewitt thing, which is I'm making way too much info that's ever going to fit in a fucking one-shot. So I guess I have more stuff for later if people want to play again, but this is a little more in-depth than Critter Showdown. It's not quite D&D. It's powered by the apocalypse, so it's not super complicated, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my god, there's so many things I'm trying to create here. So I'm hoping it's gonna be fun. It's my birthday gift to myself to run this game because Topher gave me the PDFs for Glitter Hearts because I am a big Magical Girl anime fan. So not a super lot of DMing under my belt, but I'm hoping at least my role playing stuff will help me with that a little bit.
I am looking forward to this. It's just I'm torn on what I'm playing.
Be the big muscular guy from One Punch Man.
I will not be Puny Puny Prisoner.
Yes, Puny Prisoner.
Can't be Puni either.
I'm either going to play a little debutante from Beaumont, Alabama, whose mama used to have her in every last one of those little baby pageants until the magical event occurred and I got superpowers, and they just said I was cheating. I couldn't use that for my talent portion anymore. Or
Hey, being from Alabama, we are rhotic speakers. We do not sound like Scarlett O'Hara. She drops her R's. We keep them.
the only other one I thought about is being a, since I'm going to play Taurus, is do a dude from Texas. It's like, all right, I'm going to transform. It's going to be a bit disturbing for everybody. Here we go. Woo! And just start the transformation and get my boots. I'm also tempted just to make it a parody of Bobby Hill.
But
That's my purse. I don't know you.
boy, right.
Part of me is just sitting here thinking about what your character would look like and then transform. Like you're sitting there wearing your typical cowboy stuff, boots, jeans, a button-up plaid shirt, and a cowboy hat. After your transformation, you just have bigger boots and a bigger hat and the biggest belt buckle ever.
The transformation starts off looking like a line dance, but then it just starts going off on a White Snake song halfway through.
All the terrible.
I need to play Critter Showdown again because it's been fun and it's something I'm still tweaking as we play it. The first two were basically just play testing, but you seem to like it, so
I'm pretty sure that Knox would drop everything to play Critter Showdown again.
Knox did enjoy it.
Mostly because he's been nope rope both times. But we've gone over an hour here, folks. I think we've addressed the questions of first time playing, first time DMing.
We could go on.
I'm trying to follow Claire's format here.
Protocol, Basch. We must follow protocol. If not, we are nothing but heathens.
Yeah, but half the rules as a DM are to be broken.
To be fair, most of us are considered heathens anyway.
Speak for yourself. I am an officer and a general.
But not a gentleman.
I am the very model of a Mother Major General.
And that's all I know to that. That's all I know to that song, and it's going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the night.
You're welcome, sir.
Fun times.
I'm just going to remember that on the challenge ratings for the next time we play, which I know won't be Monday.
Oh, bring it on, sir.
Let me see what I can do for those 30 difficult or those 30 rolls on stealth.
Bring it on, in the words of Joe Swanson from Family Guy. Come on!
All right, with that one, Frey, would you like to sign us off since Knox is not here?
I think I will. We appreciate anybody that joined us tonight on this impromptu bonus roundtable talking about our first times. Not like that. You can find us on Facebook under Team Bonus Action, Twitter on @bonus_team. You can always catch us here on Twitch most Mondays, Thursdays, and random other days of the week. And as our friend Knox Kyle likes to say, don't let your meat loaf.